engages in the transgression with audaciously, without concern for what the impact will be on oneself. Okay, so shame and fear of wrongdoing. Then comes non-greed, which is said to have the characteristic of the mind's lack of desire for the object, or non-clinging to the object. And this quality of non-greed, though it's expressed negatively, but it's said that it's not the mere absence of greed, but it also appears in some positive virtues like generosity, sharing with others, and also in renunciation, being willing to give up possessions in order to lead a contemplative life. Okay, then the other wholesome root, non-greed, is one of the three beautiful roots. Another beautiful root is non-hatred, which has the characteristic of lack of antagonism. It removes annoyance, and it's associated with such positive qualities as loving kindness, gentleness, friendliness, and so forth. And as we're going to see, it's said that non-hatred also appears in a positive form as the sublime quality of loving kindness, which loving kindness is the wish to promote the welfare and happiness of living beings. So a little bit later, I'm going to explain in some ways in which I find this equating non-hatred with loving kindness a bit problematic. Okay, continuing. The next one is here is called neutrality of mind. And the Pali expression means literally being right there in the middle. And this is taken to be a synonym for equanimity, not as the neutral feeling, the way we encountered the expression equanimity earlier, but this is that mental attitude of mental balance, impartiality, poise of mind, so that one isn't swayed towards liking and disliking, favoring and opposing. It's this equanimity that enables one to remain balanced when facing gain and loss, pain and pleasure, praise and blame, honor and dishonor, and so forth. And then this neutrality of mind appears amongst the four Brahmaviharas, or the four immeasurables, as the sublime quality of equanimity, as impartiality towards living beings, or we could say freedom from discrimination, from preferences and prejudices. So this mental neutrality then becomes this sublime quality of equanimity. Okay, then we have 12 universal, beautiful mental factors that fall into 6 pairs. And it's said that one term extends to the mental body, that is the other mental factors, and the other term extends to the citta itself. You could look at these in the list and it will become clearer from the list. So we have tranquility. The actual Pali just says tranquility of body, tranquility of the citta, lightness of body, lightness of the citta. So we have tranquility, lightness, malleability, wieldiness, proficiency, and rectitude. My suspicion is that originally these terms actually applied to the body itself, to the physical body. because especially through the experience of higher meditative states, where the body is felt as becoming tranquil and light, malleable, wieldy. But this didn't quite agree with the Abhidharma way of understanding these terms. And so in the Abhidharma, it said that these terms, when they refer to the body, it means the collection of mental factors, in contrast to the citta. Okay, so we have tranquility. So this is the calming down or quieting down of disturbances in the mental body and in the citta. Then lightness is, in a way, you have to just understand these terms from your own experience. Like when you're in a good mood, you feel kind of lightness in the mind and even in the body. So this is lightness, the opposite of heaviness, sluggishness. Then malleability, we could also take this to be gentleness. It's the absence of rigidity, being soft, gentle, malleable. Wieldiness means being easy to work with. Like if you have a piece of metal that's easy to shape, we say that metal is wieldy. So it has the characteristic of the subsiding of unwieldiness, not very helpful. Its function is to crush unwieldiness, not very helpful. It is manifested as success of the mental body and the citta in making something an object a little better. Okay, then the next is proficiency, which is taken to be healthiness of the mental body and consciousness, respectively. The absence of disability, maybe that's being able to work effectively, we could say. And then the next pair is rectitude, straightness, in even honesty seems to be another implication. So this has the characteristic of uprightness of the mental body and of the citta, and its function is to crush tortuousness. And maybe this is good, it's manifested as non-crookedness, and as opposed to hypocrisy and fraudulence. Okay, so these are the 19 mental factors, beautiful factors that are present in all beautiful cittas. Next come a group of 3 factors, which are called the abstinences. And these are right speech, right action, and right livelihood. And these are called abstinences because if you know the way these are formulated in the Buddha's teachings on the Noble Eightfold Path, we have what is right speech, abstaining from false speech, from malicious speech, from harsh speech, and from gossip. What is right action, abstaining from killing, from stealing, from sexual misconduct. What is right livelihood? One gives up a wrong type of livelihood and earns one's living by a right type of livelihood. So in those classical canonical definitions, these 3 factors are defined as abstaining from or refraining from unethical types of behavior. And so they become classified as the 3 abstinences. And so it's said that these 3 beautiful mental factors are responsible for the deliberate abstinence from wrong conduct by way of speech, by way of bodily action, and by way of livelihood. And it's said that these viratis occur only on an occasion when one intentionally refrains from a wrong type of conduct when the opportunity has arisen. So say if I'm sitting in my meditation seat practicing mindfulness of breathing, on that occasion, there's no right speech, right action, right livelihood. But if I'm talking to somebody and I've done something wrong and they're blaming me for doing something wrong and I'm trying to wiggle my way out of it, and then I say, I didn't do that, Joe did it. So I'm tempted to say, I didn't do that, Joe did that. But then I remember, wow, if I say that, then I'll be telling a lie. So then I deliberately refrain from telling the lie and I speak the truth. So in that case, then right speech is becoming operative. And again, say if I'm maybe sitting and reading at my desk, and then a mosquito, it's the summer and a mosquito comes and starts biting me on the back of my neck, and then I'm tempted to reach back and to slap it, then I remember, oh, I've taken the precept of not killing. And so instead of slapping the mosquito, I just brush it away. In that case, the mental factor that motivates me to refrain from killing the mosquito would be the factor of right action. And if somebody says, if I'm traveling to Canada and says, we would like to smuggle some goods up to Canada, I give you $1,000 if you smuggle these goods. And then I think I'm tempted to smuggle the goods to get the $1,000, but then I think, oh, I have to earn my living by right livelihood. Then I'm abstaining by way of this particular mental factor, the abstinence through right livelihood. So these are the three factors that are considered the three abstinences. And then the commentators, they distinguish three types of abstinence. And this is somewhat interesting. So they speak about what they call natural abstinence, abstinence by undertaking precepts, and abstinence by eradication. So natural abstinence means that one abstains from some kind of transgressive action when the opportunity arises to engage in that action, just spontaneously, due to maybe consideration of one's own social position, or just maybe from a natural disposition of conscience. So one thinks, that is wrong, I shouldn't do that, that would be dishonorable. Oh, I just noticed a typographical error. Refraining from theft. So one refrains from a transgressive action out of a sense of conscience or some consideration of one's reputation and so forth. So this is a natural abstinence. The second type is abstinence by undertaking precepts. So in this case, one abstains from transgression because one has undertaken the precepts that prescribe abstaining from those types of transgressions. So if you take the 5 precepts, then you abstain from killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, false speech, and use of intoxicants because, or let's say, out of fidelity to the precepts that one has undertaken. And so this is a stronger type of abstinence because if you're abstaining out of because of the voice of conscience or out of concern for one's reputation, you could still be tempted. But if you remember that you took the precepts probably before the image of the Buddha, in the presence of the Sangha, that will be a stronger motivation for abstaining. Then the third type of abstinence is called abstinence by eradication. And this means that when attains the world transcending path, this eradicates the disposition towards transgression of the precepts. Okay, so we have these three types of abstinence: right speech, right action, and right livelihood. And so it has the characteristics of non-transgression by way of bodily misconduct, by wrong speech, and by wrong livelihood. Okay, then we come to the two illimitables or two immeasurables, which are compassion and appreciative joy or altruistic joy. And now normally, I mean, if you are familiar with the Buddha's teachings, you know that there are four attitudes towards living beings, which are called the four immeasurables, also called the four Brahmaviharas, the divine abodes. And they're called immeasurable because they're supposed to be developed towards all sentient beings. So they have a limitless range. So the four immeasurables are loving kindness, compassion, altruistic joy, and equanimity. Metta, karuna, mudita. Yeah, I think people will have to mute their microphones. So we're getting some noise. So metta, karuna, mudita, and upekkha, the four Brahmaviharas. So if there are four immeasurables in the doctrinal teaching, why are only two listed in the Abhidharma as immeasurables? And this is the explanation given. It said because loving kindness is a mode of the Chaitasika, non-hatred, and equanimity is a mode or an aspect of the Chaitasika of mental neutrality. And so when loving kindness arises in the mind, this is what they say, it does so as a manifestation of the Chaitasika non-hatred. And when one develops impartiality or impartiality towards sentient beings, that is a manifestation of the Chaitasika of mental neutrality. But this I find a little bit problematic in that, okay, if I'm, say, sitting, doing the meditation on mindfulness of breathing, so I'm being aware of the breath coming in, breath coming out, or I'm observing the sensations in the body, going through the body from top to bottom, observing the sensations, or I'm doing recollection of the Buddha, thinking, iti piso bhagava araham sammasambuddho. On all of those occasions, since it's a wholesome citta that's taking place, you would say that in that citta, there's a mental factor of non-hatred. But I'm not thinking of other living beings, so it would be strange to say that loving kindness is present in those cittas. So it seems to me that this is a little kind of wrinkle that we find in this particular scheme in the Theravada Abhidharma. If I were constructing the Abhidharma myself, maybe going back 2,300 years or so, so I'm push myself into the group of the ancient monks who are creating the Abhidharma. So I would say, wait a minute, guys. I'm not sure that this is such an acceptable way of classifying. I would say, we come to the illimitables, we have to make metta and upekkha separate mental factors, not just take them as modes of the mental factors, non-hatred and mental neutrality. But I was not around at that time. Or if I was giving my advice, I was overruled. Well, maybe I was kicked out from the circle. Okay, then finally we come to the last of the beautiful mental factors. And this is, here it comes under the designation non-delusion, but this is equated with the mental faculty of wisdom. So it said that this is the panyindriya. So this is the faculty, indriya, of panya. And so panya is wisdom, the knowledge of things as they really are. And in the Abhidharma, we have a number of terms used synonymously. Panya, or wisdom, jnana, knowledge, non-delusion, amoha, also samaditi is included amongst these terms. But we have to, as I pointed out yesterday, we have to understand that the framework of the Abhidhamma, the word knowledge here is not being used in relation to like scientific knowledge, historical knowledge, factual knowledge, but it's used in the rather narrow sense of the faculty of understanding things in the light of the Buddha's description of the nature of phenomena. And so this is the wisdom which begins at the most elementary level with understanding the principle of moral cause and effect, the law of karma, of karmic action and its consequences. And then it proceeds through the knowledge of understanding of things like dependent origination, the three marks of existence, impermanence, dukkha, non-self, understanding the Four Noble Truths, and the direct realization of the unconditioned nibbana. So wisdom has the characteristic of penetrating things according to their own real nature, their own true nature. Okay, so now we've gone through all of the mental factors, and maybe now we can take questions about the mental factors.
Yes, Bhante. So there are some questions.
Yeah.
So what is the difference between the mental body and consciousness? I asked this because the 18th and 19th beautiful consciousness has 2 points. To me, it looks like 1 point, not 2. Can you clarify?
But maybe repeat the question again.
Yes. What is the difference between the mental body and consciousness?
Okay.
Because the 18th and 19th beautiful consciousness is
Yeah,
2.
okay, now I see. Yeah, this is what the commentators on the Abhidhamma say. They say the mental body is the collection of the other chaitasikas that are associated with the citta. So the citta is the state of, but it's the occasion of consciousness itself, the act of consciousness. And within that act of consciousness, it is the particular factor that, the way I put this, maybe call it the basic awareness of the object, the basic knowing of the object, the basic experiencing of the object that sort of underlies all the other mental activity, whereas the other chaitasikas have their more specific functions in relation to the act of knowing and of imparting a particular character to that act of consciousness, that active mental activity. Maybe to use an analogy, I'm not sure this will, actually you gave up a good analogy before. The Swiss Army knife. Okay, so we have the Swiss Army knife, and we call the whole thing a Swiss Army knife. But within the Swiss Army knife, one of the things that one takes out and uses is the blade. So you could say that is the Swiss Army knife properly, but then you have the nail cutter, the file, the screwdriver, what are some of the other things?
Toothpick.
Excuse me?
Toothpick.
A toothpick. You have 10 other little functions of the Swiss Army knife. So in one sense, the whole device, the whole instrument is a Swiss Army knife. And the blade, the knife blade, is in the narrow sense the Swiss Army knife. And then the other things are other capacities, other instruments within the Swiss Army knife. So analogously, we could say that the whole mental act is the citta, but then within that whole mental act, there is the light of awareness that illuminates the object. That is the citta in the narrower sense. And then all of the mental factors that go along with that citta in the narrow sense, performing their own functions, feeling, perception, volition, attention, thinking, could be loving kindness and so forth. All of those together constitute the body, the mental body that goes along with the citta. So we have citta in the narrow sense as one side, and all of the other mental factors collectively are the mental body.
Thank you, Bhante. Okay, another question. Are the abstinences, the illimitables, and non-delusion the three variable, beautiful mental factors?
Oh, I see. Yeah, those are variable in that they are present in certain states of consciousness, but not in other states of consciousness. And when we go on to the next section, then we're going to see where they occur and where they don't occur.
Okay.
Yeah, but those are variable. Just if we look at the list. Okay, so we have here the 19, these are universal. And then these three groups are variable. They can be present, can be absent.
Thank you, Bhante. And what is the proximate cause of neutrality of mind? Is it non-greed?
I don't remember. Within, let's see if we can find it. I don't have approximate cause here. Through reflection, one could think of ways to develop neutrality of mind, but the commentaries usually mention certain specific factors as proximate cause for neutrality of mind. So there would be different ways to develop neutrality of mind depending on the concrete situation. For example, okay, somebody praises me. And so when I'm praised, then there's a tendency for the mind to become swollen. So there will be a greed will tend to arise, to become attached to the praise. Then conceit will arise along with the greed. So if I'm not mindful, then that greed, that pride or conceit will arise on account of praise. And then if I'm criticized, then dejection will arise, aversion or hatred and dejection will arise because of blame and criticism. So, like one way to develop neutrality of mind is to reflect that praise and blame are just shifting sands of the world. They're just we call them the worldly winds. Sometimes the wind blows to the east, sometimes to the west. And so sometimes we receive praise, sometimes we receive blame. And if I become attached to them, then I will undergo elation and dejection. So if I want to maintain my peace of mind, I should develop this neutrality of mind. So that could be a way, kind of proximate cause for developing neutrality of mind in regard to worldly conditions is wise attention, proper reflection. In regard to people, developing neutrality towards people. So some people are good to me, other people are bad to me. So one way to reflect is that, well, even though some are good to me, some are bad to me, but all people are essentially alike in that they all want to be well and happy. They all want to be free from suffering. So if the bad person is doing harmful things to me, I should realize that person wants to be happy and they're just doing these bad things because of their deluded thinking. And so I develop compassion towards the harmful person. First, I develop compassion towards that person, and the person who treats me nicely, I can just feel appreciation towards their good behavior. But then I sort of step back and think both are basically alike in that they have the same fundamental urges for well-being and happiness. And so in that way, I can regard them as with this attitude of mental neutrality and then extend that to others as well.
Thank you, Bhante. Then there's a Pugalavardin question here. Interesting.
What question?
A Pugalavardin question.
Okay.
Is the listing of the listing of the beautiful Chitastika, who is the person doing these mental actions?
Yeah, well, the point of the Abhidharma itself, of the whole Abhidharma, is to show how all mental activities are possible without there being a concrete, persisting self as the agent of the actions. So from the, call this the analytical point of view, or maybe the phenomenological point of view, we just have these conditioned phenomena arising through conditions, performing their functions, and passing away. So from the analytical or phenomenological point of view, we don't speak of a person performing these activities. But when we sort of pull away from that point of view or that framework and think in conventional terms, then we say that it is the person who is performing these activities. But we shouldn't reify the idea of person. We shouldn't reify the idea of person and take it to be signifying some kind of substantial reality existing in its own right. It's a convenient expression or term to refer to the totality of the mental and material processes that constitute what we designate as the person. So we could say, maybe we could say that the person is a dependent designation, a designation that is used as a matter of convenience to refer to this complex, interdependent, interwoven process of physical and mental events.
Thank you, Bhante.
Yeah, but as you indicated, like one of the early Buddhist schools came up with the notion that, I think they developed this with regard to the five aggregates, that the five aggregates can't function without a person as their foundation or as their basis. And so they posited that in addition to the five aggregates, there is a pugala, that is a person who is neither the same as the five aggregates, nor something existing independent of the five aggregates, but it's something existing in a kind of inconceivable relationship to the five aggregates. Okay, continue.
Yes, Bhante, there are two linked questions here. What is the proximate cause of non-greed? Is it right view?
Because let's see what the way the text gives approximate cause. Yeah, I see I don't have the proximate cause here. I'd say that there are various ways to develop non-greed, to sort of weaken greed, and these will function as the proximate cause for non-greed. So I would say that certainly wisdom, wise reflection, in fact, wise reflection, one could say, is almost invariably a proximate cause for all wholesome states. This is in Pali, yoniso manasikara. So wise reflection, wise consideration, thorough reflection, thorough consideration. So if one considers the drawbacks in indulging in greed, that will weaken the grip of greed and lead to the absence of greed. And like one of the most powerful ways to do this is to do the meditation on death and impermanence and death. So when you reflect that this body is bound to die, and so then that will reduce the clinging and the attachment to the body and to one's life. And when one reflects that all material possessions are impermanent and unstable, that will help to reduce the greed and the attachment to material possessions.
Thank you, Bhante. Then there's another proximate cause question here. Forgive me. It says, please explain the statement, the proximate cause of conceit is greed dissociated from views.
Yeah, this is, I mean, it's sometimes I don't really agree perfectly with some of these explanations. So this is really just quoting from the Abhidharma commentary. So conceit, as I think I mentioned this yesterday, always arises in the chittas connected with greed. The conceit doesn't arise in the chittas connected with hatred or with shared delusion. Though, of course, delusion always underlies conceit, but it doesn't arise in those two chittas connected with strong delusion, but it arises in the chittas associated with greed. And conceit does not arise at the same time as views, because it's said that conceit and views have different aspects or different attributes. Conceit, its attribute is that of self-exaltation, like exalting oneself, whereas view takes the form of formulating a kind of theoretical position. And so their modes of occurrence are different. And so when views are occurring in chittas associated with greed, conceit will not occur in those chittas. Whereas when the chittas are occurring associated with greed, but not associated with views, then conceit can arise in those chittas. Not necessarily, but when it arises, conceit will only arise in citas connected with greed and dissociated from views. So that might be the reason why the text says that the proximate cause of greed, proximate cause of conceit is greed dissociated from views.
Thank you, Bhante. All my other questions are to do with the Bhavanga, so maybe there'll be a chance later, but it's not related to Chitasika.
Okay, so maybe we could take like a 5-minute break and then we'll come back and move into the next section.
Thank you, Bhante.
Okay, we'll come back at 6. We'll say 6:02. We'll start again. I'm sorry. For you, it's
3:02.
3:02. Yeah. Okay. Now the next parts of this chapter develop with regard to the Chaitasikas. They apply 2 methods of investigation. One is called the method of Sampayoga, which it's translated here as, I think, association. And the other is Sangaha, which is, I think, translated as combination. The 2 methods are complementary. And what the method of association involves is taking the Chaitasikas, each of the Chaitasikas, and then inquiring in what citas do we find these Chaitasikas. The method of combination involves taking the citta and then inquiring in this citta which Chaitasikas are found. And so the 2 methods sort of intersect so that one could construct a table showing the integration of the 2 methods, which we have. Yeah, I think it's here on pages 112 and 113. But let's go through. Okay, so first, the manual takes the method of association, the association of mental factors. So he says we will explain the association of each of these mental factors with the different states of consciousness. I'm not going to try to do this to cover every aspect of this, since it can be it becomes extremely technical and extremely detailed, but we'll do enough to get a general idea, and then we could take the rest of the session for questions. Okay, so first, as obvious, the 7 universal mental factors. So those will be found in all the 89 types, all the 89 citas. That's why they're called universal. Okay, then we come to the particular or the occasional mental factors. So we have 6 occasional mental factors: initial application, sustained application, decision, energy, zest or delight, and desire. Okay, now initial application, or in Pali Vitakka, arises in 55 citas. I'm not going to try to enumerate all these 55, but it will arise in all types of sense sphere, all sense sphere citas, except the 2 sets of 5-fold sense consciousness. That is eye, ear, nose, tongue, and body consciousness, because those types of sense consciousness are very weak. All they do is simply take in the form of the object. They don't involve any investigation of the object. So they arise in all types of sense sphere consciousness, except the two sets of fivefold sense consciousness, the two sets of the unwholesome resultants and the wholesome resultants. And then they also arise in the first, in all of the types of first jhana consciousness. Because the first jhana has initial application and sustained application. Okay, now sustained application, it said, arises in 66 citas. So it arises in these same 55 along with initial application. But in the second jhana, initial application drops away, but sustained application or vichara remains. And so we have more citas. The citas of the second jhana include sustained application, but not initial application. Okay, decision arises in all the citas except for the two sets of fivefold sense consciousness and consciousness, the citta accompanied by doubt. Because when you're in a state of doubt, you're not making a decision, not able to make a decision. Then energy arises in all the cittas except the five sense door adverting consciousness, the two sets of fivefold sense consciousness, the receiving consciousness, and the investigating consciousness. This is a little puzzling to me because it would seem to me that the investigating consciousness at least would need some energy, a boost. But you know, I don't make this up. I just have to repeat what I'm told. So they say that we don't have energy in the investigating citta. Okay, then this is what's called zest. This is piti. Again, I prefer to translate this maybe as delight. So this will arise in all the cittas except those accompanied by displeasure. Those are the two cittas connected with hatred, rooted in hatred. And piti always has to be associated with pleasant feeling. So if the citta is accompanied by neutral feeling, which is called equanimity, then delight will not arise. And delight doesn't arise in body consciousness, even when body consciousness has pleasant feeling, but that is a pleasant physical feeling, whereas delight arises only in association with pleasant mental feeling. And then delight does not arise in the fourth jhana consciousness. The fourth jhana citta has pleasant feeling, but to attain the fourth jhana, one has to overcome delight or piti. So if you look at the formula for the fourth jhana in the Abhidharma scheme, you see that it has pleasant feeling and one-pointedness of mind, but it doesn't have zest or delight. And then desire, this is, remember, this is not desire as craving, but this is the desire to act, the desire to achieve some result. Desire arises in all the cittas except the rootless, except the 18 rootless chittas, and the 2 chittas accompanied by delusion, that is the doubting chitta and the chitta dominated by restlessness or agitation. Yeah, the explanation says that energy is excluded from the 3 kinds of investigating consciousness because these chittas are still of a relatively weak and passive nature. But it seems to me that if the chitta is undertaking investigation, it needs some energy to do that. Okay, so zest, so this is delight, is always accompanied by pleasant mental feeling. And then the chittas of the 4th jhana contain that joyful feeling, but without zest. And then the 2 chittas rooted in delusion are so dense that they exclude purposeful action, and therefore desire to act is missing, so excluded from them. Okay, so that takes care of the ethically variables, the universals and the occasionals. Now we come to the unwholesome factors. So we have 4 factors are the universal unwholesome factors: delusion, lack of shame, lack of moral dread, and restlessness. So those are found in all 12 unwholesome chittas. Greed is found only in the 8 chittas accompanied by greed, which we saw yesterday. And then wrong view arises in the 4 chittas rooted in greed associated with wrong view. So because that chitta is designated associated with wrong view, so wrong view has to be present in those 4 types of chittas. But among the greed-rooted chittas, there are 4 that are disconnected, dissociated from wrong view. So in those 4 dissociated from wrong view, conceit can arise. It doesn't necessarily arise. So we could say that wrong view and conceit are sort of the little brothers of greed. And then we have the chittas associated with aversion or with hatred. And so in these chittas, we find, well, aversion is hatred is identical with aversion. In these chittas, we can find envy, miserliness, which is my better rendering than avarice, and regret. So envy, miserliness, and regret are associated with aversion, but these don't necessarily have to arise in the chitta associated with aversion, but only if you become envious of the success of somebody, then envy arises. If you don't want to share your assets with others, then miserliness is present. If you are troubled by regret over some past misdeed, then regret is present. But there can be many, many chittas associated with hatred or aversion without envy, avarice, and without envy, miserliness, and regret. Then sloth and torpor, or dullness and drowsiness, are found in the 5 types of prompted chittas. 4 prompted chittas connected with greed, and one prompted citta connected with aversion. And doubt is found only in the citta associated with doubt. Yeah, here I explain why wrong view and conceit are mutually exclusive. So it said that the two, that is, wrong view and conceit, exhibit contrary qualities, and thus they cannot coexist at the same time in the same citta. Wrong view occurs in the mode of misinterpreting things, interpreting things in a manner contrary to their real nature, whereas conceit occurs in the mode of self-evaluation, taking oneself to be superior, equal, or inferior to others. And so because they occur in these different modes, so they're mutually exclusive. And then wrong view necessarily occurs in the four cittas rooted in greed and accompanied by wrong view. But conceit is not a necessary factor in the four greed-rooted cittas dissociated from wrong view. Okay, so these four, hatred, envy, avarice, and worry, occur only in the cittas associated with aversion. And yeah, so hatred is identical with aversion, so that always occurs in those two cittas. But the other three factors occur variably: envy, avarice, and worry, or miserliness and regret. And then sloth and torpor, they don't arise in the unprompted or spontaneous cittas, which are naturally active, but only in the prompted, unwholesome cittas. It's a little problematic. What about the prompted, wholesome cittas? It seems that those are sluggish cittas, but because sloth and torpor are considered unwholesome mental factors, they can't exist in a wholesome citta. Okay, then the beautiful factors. Okay, so the 19 universal beautiful factors occur in all the 59 kinds of beautiful, all the 59 beautiful cittas. Now, this is an interesting point. The three abstinences are necessarily found together in all of the supramundane types of all of the supramundane cittas, because in the supramundane cittas, the 8 factors of the Noble Eightfold Path are present, and 3 of those factors of the Noble Eightfold Path are right speech, right action, and right livelihood. So the 3 abstinences are necessarily found in the 8 types of world transcending citta, the 4 types of path consciousness, the 4 fruition cittas. But in mundane sense sphere wholesome consciousness, they are only present sometimes and then separately. So when right speech is present in a mundane wholesome citta, there's no right action or right livelihood. When right action is present, then there's no right speech and right livelihood. Because in the mundane wholesome citta, the abstinence has the function of motivating one to refrain from an unwholesome action towards which one might be disposed. Okay, this is a little technical here. These are the illimitables, that is, compassion and altruistic joy. So these, that said, they arise at times variably in 28 chittas. So this will be the 12 sublime types of consciousness, excluding the fifth jhana. So this would be the 4 lower jhanas, jhanas 1, 2, 3, and 4, when they're wholesome in the resultant jhana consciousness and in the functional jhana consciousness of an arahat. So in those jhana consciousnesses, there can be jhana based on compassion and altruistic joy. Also, jhana can be based on loving kindness and on equanimity. But here, loving kindness is considered to be equivalent to the mental factor of non-hatred. Okay, then these illimitables also can arise in the 8 types of sense sphere wholesome consciousness. So when we feel just with our ordinary non-jhana consciousness, our day-to-day consciousness, when we feel compassion towards those who are suffering, then the mental factor compassion is present. And when we are rejoicing in the good fortune or success of others, then the mental factor of altruistic joy is present. And also in the case of the arhats, when they feel, without going into jhana, but with their ordinary sense sphere consciousness, if they feel compassion for those who are suffering, then compassion is present. If they rejoice in the success of others, then altruistic joy is present. Okay, then wisdom enters into combination with 47 types, 47 chittas. So it goes into the 12 types of sense sphere chittas associated with knowledge. But it doesn't, we don't find it in the wholesome sense sphere chittas disconnected from knowledge. And then wisdom, as we said, I mentioned yesterday, occurs in all of the jhana consciousnesses, that's the fine material sphere chittas, the immaterial sphere chittas, and in the supermundane chittas. So there are 12 types of sense sphere, 12 sense sphere chittas associated with knowledge. Then we have 35 sublime. Let's see if we can get them. 5, with regard to fine material sphere, 5 wholesome, 5 resultant, 5 functional, that's 15. Immaterial sphere, wholesome, resultant, functional, that's 12. So 15 and 12 is 27. And then we have the 8 supermundane, 4 paths, 4 fruits. So we have 15. Fine material sphere plus 12 immaterial sphere plus 8 supermundane. So that way we get these 35 chittas with wisdom. Okay, what I'm going to do now, okay, now we're coming to the section on combinations of mental factors. So this is the procedure by which one takes the chitta the state of consciousness, and one looks into that state of consciousness and inquires, what are the mental factors that enter into that citta? Of course, I want to leave time for questions, so I'm just going to take a few cittas as examples of how this is done. If you want on your own, you can go back and look at this and try to follow it in detail. You know, skip over the super mundane because there's certain complexities there that we don't have time to go into. Let us take we'll take the first jhana consciousness, 3 types of first jhana consciousness. So it said 35 states, so chaitasikas, enter into this kind of consciousness. So we have the 13 ethically variable factors. So there are the 7 universals and then the 6 occasionals. So in the first jhana consciousness, we have initial application, sustained application. We have zest or delight. We have desire. We have energy and decision. So the 6 occasional factors are present. Then 22 beautiful mental factors. Let's see what the beautiful mental factors here. So 22 beautiful mental factors. So we have the 19 are necessary. And we always have wisdom in the jhana consciousness. And then possibly we can have compassion and appreciative joy. What's interesting, and maybe it seems a little puzzling, in the jhana consciousness, the 3 abstinences are absent. They're absent because when one is in the jhana, one is not attempting to refrain from wrong speech, wrong action, or wrong livelihood. These occur only in the sense sphere consciousness. So it excludes the 3 abstinences, and is said that compassion and appreciative joy should be combined separately. So they never occur together because compassion and altruistic joy function in different ways, and they might be present and might not be present. If you're doing the meditation on compassion or appreciative joy, in that case, it would be present. But if you're absorbed in jhana based on mindfulness of breathing or a kasina object, then that citta would not have compassion or appreciative joy. In that case, there would be only 20 beautiful factors. And so here we have 13 ethically variables, 22 beautiful factors, so 35 as the maximum. But if compassion and altruistic joy are not present, then there would be 33. Okay, when you go to the second jhana consciousness, then initial application falls away. So in that case, you have just 34 factors. In the third jhana, then both initial application and sustained application are absent. So you have 33. In the fourth jhana, then zest falls away. In that case, you have 32. Yeah, so and then in the fifth jhana consciousness, you don't have the compassion and altruistic joy in the fifth jhana consciousness. It's said only in the lower four jhanas, but in the fifth jhana consciousness, equanimity prevails. And so that excludes the compassion and altruistic joy. So in that case, you have a maximum of 30. Okay, sense sphere, beautiful consciousness. So in the wholesome types, in the first couplet, let's see what the first couplet is. So the first couplet is the citta accompanied by joy, associated with knowledge, unprompted, and accompanied by joy associated with knowledge prompted. So in this case, we have at the maximum 38 chaitasikas. So we have all 13 ethically variable factors and all 25 beautiful mental factors may be present, but some may not be present. So at the maximum, 25 beautiful factors, that is, yeah, you could have one or another of the two illimitables, compassion or altruistic joy, and one or another of the three abstinences. But it's possible that you don't have, for a citta of this type to arise without these. And in that case, you would take out 2 and 3. So then you would have 33 mental factors. But this is taking only the maximum that's possible. Then when you go to the second couplet, those are the cittas disconnected from knowledge, dissociated from knowledge. So here in the second couplet, you have to exclude the faculty of wisdom. And in the third couplet, associated with knowledge, it excludes zest or elation. So in this case, you have the maximum of 37. And in the fourth couplet, you exclude knowledge and zest, so you have a maximum of 36. So we'll just take maybe 1 or 2 of the unwholesome types of cittas. So we'll take the unwholesome, we'll take the first unwholesome citta rooted in greed, and this will be an unprompted citta. So we have 19 mental factors. So here we have all 13 ethically variable factors, the 4 universal unwholesome factors, that is delusion, lack of shame, lack of moral dread, and restlessness. So 13 and 4, that's 17. And then we have greed and wrong view. So this is unprompted. But now if we take the prompted, the types of prompted consciousness, we would add to each of these sloth and torpor. So for the first one, here we have 19, because this is unprompted. But if you take the prompted, the sluggish citta, so for that, you have sloth and torpor present, so the number goes up to 21. And then we'll take, as an example, one of the cittas rooted in hatred, aversion. Okay, so now we have the unprompted citta associated with aversion. Here we have 20 states, 20 mental factors. So we have 12 ethically variable factors, excluding zest or delight, because the state of mind rooted in hatred is an unhappy state of mind. So you don't have zest or delight present. And then in this, you have 4 defilements can be present: hatred, envy, miserliness, and regret. But as they explain, envy, miserliness, and regret should be combined separately. They don't arise together. But at maximum, we could have 20 in this type of unprompted citta. But if the citta associated with hatred is prompted, that is instigated by some external influence, then you have to add sloth and torpor. So then the number will go to, I guess, to 22. Okay, maybe this is enough for examples. And now I think we should use the rest of the period for questions. And if you want to see, like, to work this all out in detail, you can look at this table, the comprehensive chart on mental factors, which for the method of association, you take the particular mental factors and then see which cittas they occur in. And for the method of, that's the method of association. For the method of combination, you take the citta and see what mental factors are present in those cittas. Okay, so let us spend the rest of the time on questions.
Thank you, Bhante. That was wonderful. So we have questions in 4 different types. If I may, can I just run from the top? The first about the death process, which was the ones left over from the Bhavanga.
Right, yeah.
So let's just knock these 2 off. How long will consciousness remain in the body after death before it takes rebirth?
Okay, so this is a question that was disputed between the different Buddha schools. The Theravada school, based on the Abhidharma, takes the position that immediately after the death citta, the next rebirth citta arises. So there's not even a split second between the death citta from life A and the rebirth citta in life B. Some of the other schools, including the Sarvastivada school, held that there is an intermediate period between one life and the next life in which consciousness remains in a kind of suspended animation, perhaps we could call it. In fact, this is the expression used in Sanskrit is antarabhava, which the word antara, when translated into Tibetan, becomes bardo. I think it's antarabhava becomes bardo. So that is the origin of the concept of bardo in Tibetan Buddhism, stemming from the Sarvastivada Abhidharma. And I have to say, this is a point on which I disagree with the Theravada school and side with the Sarvastivada school, because it seems to me that it just seems too unnatural for a rebirth to take place immediately after the traumatic event of the death taking place. It seems that there has to be a certain period in which the life stream or the mental stream sort of processes all of the formations that have been created in the past existence and sort of tabulates them in a way to prepare them for the next rebirth. And so, and also this is a big topic in itself, to me, to correspond with what has been reported by the cases of people, not deep meditators, but ordinary people who sometimes have spontaneous recollection of their previous life and death. And that when they report what happened, they report undergoing the death, and then they report that they remained in a kind of almost disembodied condition, sort of roaming around, moving around, observing the environment, until at a certain point they found themselves attracted to a couple. And then they waited around till the couple had sexual relations, and then they felt themselves drawn into the womb of the woman, and then they lost consciousness. So that seems to be the intermediate state between the two existences.
Thank you, Bhante. And there's a related question here. What is the difference between a death consciousness and the subsequent rebirth consciousness evolving from that? How does karma flow from one existence to the next?
Okay, the death consciousness is of the same type as the rebirth consciousness and bhavanga of that same existence. So it has a different function, but it's basically the same type as either one of, say, the sense sphere, the sense sphere, beautiful resultant consciousnesses, say in the human rebirth. So it will be the same type from rebirth through the life continuum or bhavanga and the death. But then the next rebirth consciousness, the rebirth consciousness of the next life, will be a different type of consciousness. That rebirth consciousness is the result of the karma from the previous life that has produced the new existence. And somehow the karma is transmitted from the old life to the new life. How that takes place, I don't know. And it's never really explicitly dealt with in the text. But it's just, I think the position is that as long as the karma remains unexhausted, it will have the potential to produce the appropriate results. I hope that answers the question. Okay, we could move on to the next question.
Forgive me, Bhante. Someone's interfering with my screen. Sorry, Bhante.
We can hear you.
No, I can't read my question. Is one of the reasons why all people have different personalities because their rebirth linking cheetahs are caused by different karmic resultants with different objects? Is this how it's happening?
Yeah, I would say certainly the difference in the personalities, characteristics of people, it's determined to a great extent by their karmic accumulations from previous lives, but not only the karmic accumulations, but also by the character tendencies and dispositions that they developed in previous lives. Even when those those dispositions of character and their tendencies and habits were not actually generating the karma that produces its results, but still those tendencies and dispositions recur in the character of people in their next existence.
Thank you, Bhante. And could you answer, this is an interesting question. What is the difference between blank mental states and the supramundane states?
Blank mental state? You mean like somebody faints?
I think maybe in meditation, perhaps. This is probably a reference to that.
Well, I'd say a blank mental state is just, it seems to be a drop. I would say that the blank mental state, maybe even that some people experience in meditation, would be a drop, momentary drop into the bhavanga. And so they fall into the bhavanga and then come out of it. And they say that they experience the blanking out of consciousness. in their meditation. But the supramundane state is a state in which the person is actually experiencing nibbana, taking the unconditioned as the object. So it's not just a blanking out, but maybe it's the brightest, most luminous type of experience possible.
Thank you, that's very helpful. Now there's some questions about the Chitta Niyama process. The process. One is here, is it measurable by a device, say a computer?
I don't think the Abhidharma commentators have spoken about measuring.
We're asking your opinion, probably.
It would be interesting whether people in the field of computer science can create devices that can detect and discriminate different chittas within the cognitive process. But maybe you would have to find a computer scientist, extremely skilled, knowledgeable computer scientist who has a very thorough familiarity with Buddhist Abhidhamma theory and get them to work on developing such a device. So maybe theoretically it's possible, but whether anybody has ever done that, it doesn't seem likely.
And then there's another question here. How does multitasking happen all at once using the 5 or 6 senses?
Yeah, what seems to be multitasking, look at from a Abhidhamma point of view, is that you're not really doing 2 or more things at the same time with your citta. But what is happening is that the citta is doing one thing very quickly, coming out, doing something else very quickly, coming out, doing something else very quickly and coming out. It's a little bit like, again, to use the analogy that I used yesterday to illustrate the way that cognitive process swings back, or the flow of citta swings back and forth between the bhavanga and active cognitive process. It's like the computer screen, which is constantly flashing, going blank and then flashing on, going blank and flashing on, hundreds of times a second, so quickly that I don't see it, that I don't see the blank flashes of the computer screen, but it's still occurring. So when we're doing several things at the same time, it's actually different cognitive processes flowing by in very, very quick succession. So it seems to a gross awareness that we're doing several things at the same time.
Yes, Mandy, thank you. And then there's some questions about the characteristics of the chittas prior to the jhavanas. If vitakka can arise with chittas prior to the jhavanas, does that mean that they can be conscious and so observable?
That they can be
observable, I think, is what's being asked, because if vitakka can be associated with them, then mental application can be associated with all the chittas prior to the jhavanas, apart from sense consciousnesses.
I have heard from people who are quite advanced meditators who gain the 4th jhana and then do insight meditation after emerging from the 4th jhana, that they can observe the moments in the cognitive process and even analyze the individual chittas into their constituent mental factors. That's what they say. I don't have that experience myself, and whether they're truly observing this or using their previous knowledge of the Abhidhamma to sort of project their knowledge upon their experience, that I don't know. But it would seem to me in theory that with extremely powerful and sharp mindfulness, that one should be able to, at least in reflection, retrospection, be able to see that in those early chittas in the cognitive process, that one should be able to see the mental factors that were present.
Thank you, Bhante. It might be worth mentioning that current cognitive psychology says that the alpha frequency is the speed of refreshing of the sense array, which is about 20 times a second.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting if this has been observed. That's what the current theory is in terms of how the brain is working. Okay, there's a question here. Why is sati not categorized as ethically variable in the Theravada and Abhidhamma, though it can accompany unwholesome chittas?
Yeah, this is a
classic.
A point, again, where I'm a bit of a heretic within the Theravada frame. So I just explained the way sati is classified within the Theravada Abhidhamma, but my objection is my counterexample. We have the assassin who's charged with assassinating a head of state. So he goes into his hiding place, perfectly aware of everything that he's doing. When he sees the head of state driving by in procession, he takes out his gun, extremely, in my description, perfectly mindful of what he's doing. He pulls the trigger, he's perfectly mindful, puts it away after killing the head of state. With perfect mindfulness, he walks down the steps and walks away mindful of what he's doing. It seems to me that I don't know any other word to describe the care and attention and self-possession that the assassin has in all of these actions, any other word but mindfulness. But within the framework of the Theravada Abhidhamma, is probably always thinking of sati as a factor that reminds one to engage in wholesome activities, or that accompanies wholesome activities. So for that reason, it becomes exclusively a wholesome factor.
Thank you, Bhante.
Or a beautiful factor.
Can we functionally separate feeling and perception, or are they functionally interdependent?
They function interdependently. On reflection, we could separate them, but in their actual occurrence, they are occurring together, but they're different functions. It's a little bit, in fact, there's a Buddhist text that compares the way these different mental factors work together in the same citta. It compares it to the different spices that are used to prepare an Indian curry. So when you have the curry, you'll have cumin seed, black pepper, chili pepper, turmeric, probably a number of other spices. I don't know all of the spices, but they're all blended into the curry sauce. And so when you taste it, you just taste curry, but somebody with an extremely, maybe a cook with an extremely sharp sense of taste would be able to distinguish, that's the turmeric, that's the flavor of the cumin seed, that's the black pepper, that's the red pepper.
Thank you, Bhante. There's a question here. Can you talk about Bhavanga Upacheda and how that leads to adverting?
I can only say that it means that because the object has impinged on the sense faculty with a certain degree of strength, so it's disturbed the continuity of the Bhavanga, and then it's just part of the automatic process that it gets cut off, and then the process begins with the 5-door adverting.
Okay, thank you, Bhante. Then there's a question here regarding chittas. Kama Subhama chittas have 8 kusala, 8 vipaka, and 8 kriya chittas. I don't see vipaka chittas under akusala chittas.
That's a good point. And what is said is that the akusala chittas, the results of the akusala chittas are always rootless resultants. There are no results of the akusala chittas that have unwholesome roots. And the way my teacher explained that to me, that this means that the akusala chittas are relatively weak compared to the wholesome chittas. Because the wholesome chittas, when they produce results, they can produce beautiful results, results with beautiful roots. But the unwholesome chittas, even fierce hatred or powerful greed, are still, maybe from a dharmic point of view, so weak that when they produce their karmic results, they're always rootless results.
Thank you, Bhante. Then there's some general questions about jhana meditation. With such emphasis on supramundane states, would it be fair to say that the Abhidharma is generated from insight into the jhana states?
Well, certainly I would say that, or I think it's likely that the formulators of the Abhidharma back in the very early period had jhanic experiences.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to come to an end soon.
Yes, Bhante.
Because our monastery, we have a Sunday evening meditation program from 7 to 8.
Forgive me, Bhante. Let's stop here. There's only 2 more questions anyway. And thank you so much. I'll hand back to Wangmo now.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just, and sort of to close, for those who want to investigate the Abhidhamma more, I had a few books to recommend. So one book is called the Theravada Abhidharma, Inquiry into the Nature of Conditioned Reality. The author's name is, he uses just the first initial Y, and his family name is Karuna Dasa. And this is published by Wisdom Publications, so you could find it quite easily. So this is on the Theravada Abhidharma. Then there's another work on the Theravada Abhidharma from a more practical standpoint. And this is by a Malaysian Buddhist nun named Susila, S-U-S-I-L-A. She is a student of the famous Pa Auk Soyador meditation master. It's called Unraveling the Mysteries of Mind and Body Through Abhidharma. It's published in Malaysia, but there might be distributors in the United States. And then I have a big book, which I haven't gotten to read yet, called Savastivada Abhidharma. And this is by Bhikkhu Dhamma Jyoti. Dhamma with 2 M's and Jyoti, J-O-T-I. And this is published in Hong Kong. But again, there might be a distributor in the US. University of Hong Kong Center for Buddha Studies. Okay.
Thank you so much, Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi. We are so blessed to have had the last 2 days with you, energy and all of this wisdom to be transmitted virtually around the world. It's just pretty amazing where everyone has come in from. And may we dedicate the merit to your long life, and for these teachings just be extended as far as possible in time and space. And thank you all for being a part of this retreat, for your time and energy. And we'll keep you updated with a YouTube, which will take us a few days to edit, but we'll surely send this out along with the recommended books that Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi has suggested. And finally, those of you who want to stay in touch with Bhikkhu Bodhi, he's currently residing at the Chuang Yen Monastery in New York. B-U-A-S. You can find him online. I can also put that in the message that we'll be sending out. If you would like to know more about his teachings, I understand you're going to be teaching an Anguttara Nikaya online course.
Yeah, so I'll be on the retreat through the winter months from January 21st to the end of March, and then we'll resume at the end of March with the core classes.
Okay, well, thank you so much. May everyone be well and healthy, and we'll see you soon again. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante.